Ethan Cole walked into Cresthaven Academy every morning the same way. Head down, backpack on, steps quiet. He did not look for trouble. He did not look for friends. He simply walked to his class, sat in the back row, and kept to himself. Nobody knew his last name meant anything. Nobody knew it meant everything. The school was full of students from powerful families. Some came from old money. Some came from wolf packs so strong their names alone could silence a room. They wore their family crests on their blazers like armor. They walked through the halls like they owned the floors beneath their feet, and they probably did. Ethan wore a plain blazer, no crest, no symbol, nothing that said who he was or where he came from. To everyone at Cresthaven, he was simply nobody. And in a school full of somebodies, that made him a target. It started on his very first week. A boy named Marcus Vane knocked Ethan's lunch tray out of his hands in the cafeteria. The food hit the floor. The hall went quiet for 1 second, then erupted in laughter. Marcus did not even look back. He just kept walking, laughing with his friends, like knocking something out of a stranger's hands was the most normal thing in the world. Ethan picked up his tray. He cleaned up the food. He sat down and ate what was left. He said nothing. Marcus Vane was the son of the third most powerful alpha in the entire region. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. Every student at Cresthaven either wanted to be his friend or was afraid of him. Most were both. He had a talent for finding weakness. And Ethan, with his plain blazer and his quiet eyes and his complete lack of pack affiliation, looked like weakness wrapped in a school uniform. Hey Blank, that was the name Marcus gave him, Blank, because his blazer had no crest, because he had no pack, because, according to Marcus, he was nothing. Every day it was something. A shoulder shoved in the corridor, notes swept off his desk in class, whispered words that followed him from room to room. Rogue, nobody, Blank. The teachers heard it. Some looked away. Some told Marcus to settle down, then forgot about it by the next period. The school had important families to keep happy. Ethan was not an important family. There was one person who did not look away. Her name was Lena Frost. She sat 2 rows ahead of Ethan in biology and 3 seats to his left in history. She had sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, and she came from a mid-level pack that gave her just enough standing to speak up without too much consequence. One afternoon, when Marcus flicked Ethan's pen across the classroom and laughed, Lena turned around in her seat and stared at Marcus with the kind of look that could cut glass. "Do you feel better now?" she said. "Does that actually make you feel good?" Marcus smiled at her. "Stay out of it, Frost. Someone has to." She turned back around. She did not look at Ethan, but she passed his pen back to him without a word. Ethan looked at it in his hand. He almost said thank you. Instead, he just nodded, and Lena gave a small nod back, like a deal had been quietly made between them. After class, she walked beside him down the corridor. "You should say something back," she told him. "You just sit there and take it. It makes him think he can keep going." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "It is not time yet." Lena looked at him like he had said something in a foreign language. "What does that mean?" He gave her a small, tired smile. "It means I am waiting." "For what?" He did not answer, and somehow that was more unsettling than any answer he could have given. That night, Ethan sat on the edge of his bed in his dormitory. The room was small and tidy. He kept it neat, because neatness was one of the few things he could control here. He picked up his phone and called a number he had memorized before he could read. The voice on the other end was deep and calm. It was the kind of voice that did not need to be loud to fill a room. "How are you, son?" "I am fine," Ethan said. A pause. "Are you ready to come home?" Ethan looked at the wall in front of him. Plain, white, no crest, just like his blazer. "Not yet," he said. Another pause, longer this time. "I am proud of you," his father said. Ethan closed his eyes. Those 4 words were the only warmth he allowed himself in this place. He held on to them the way people hold on to something small and solid in the dark. "Good night, Father," he said. "Good night, Ethan." He hung up and sat in the quiet for a long time. Weeks passed. The days blurred together in the way that difficult things do, when you are simply trying to survive them one at a time. Marcus grew bolder. His games grew meaner. He spread rumors through the school that Ethan was a rogue wolf, someone whose own pack had abandoned them. In their world, that was one of the worst things you could say about a person. It meant you were broken. It meant you were unwanted. Students who had been neutral toward Ethan began keeping their distance. Nobody wanted to be seen with someone whose reputation was that low. Even some of the teachers started looking at him differently, not with cruelty, but with the quiet pity people give to those they have already decided cannot be helped. Lena was the exception. She sat with him at lunch 3 times that week. She did not make it a big moment. She just set her tray down across from his and started talking about her history essay, and Ethan talked back, and for 40 minutes it felt almost normal. Then came the pack assembly. It was a formal school event held every semester in the main hall. Students stood in their family lines, displayed their lineage crests, and recited their alpha bloodlines to a panel of visiting pack elders. It was meant to celebrate heritage. In practice, it was a public display of who mattered and who did not. Ethan stood at the very back of the hall, apart from every group, no crest to show, no line to stand in. He was used to it. He had learned to make himself small in moments like this, to take up as little space as possible, to let the ceremony wash over him without touching him. But Marcus was not going to let that happen. From across the hall, loud enough to cut through the room, Marcus called out, "Did not know they were letting rogues into the assembly this year." The room went quiet. Every head turned. Ethan stood still. He did not look at Marcus. He kept his eyes forward. Dean Holt, standing at the front of the hall, pressed his lips together. He said nothing. But Lena, standing in her family line 3 rows ahead, stepped out of her place. "Shut your mouth, Marcus," she said. Her voice was steady. The silence in the hall shifted. This was not someone ignoring Marcus. This was someone challenging him, openly, in front of pack elders. Marcus turned to look at her slowly. He smiled, but it was not a warm smile. "Careful, Frost," he said. "Your pack is not big enough to back up that mouth." Lena did not move. She held his gaze, but everyone in the room could see the math, and the math was not in her favor. Then Ethan stepped forward. He moved quietly, and he moved calmly, and he placed himself between Marcus and Lena without a word. He was not a large person. He was not broad like Marcus, or loud like Marcus. He just stood there, between them, still as a stone. "That is enough," he said, quietly. Marcus looked at him. Something flickered in his expression, not quite surprise, not quite curiosity. Something more like a person seeing a small fire where they expected nothing. Then he shoved Ethan, hard, with both hands. Ethan did not fall. He did not stumble. He barely moved. And for one single moment, so fast that half the room missed it, his eyes changed. The usual dark brown went gold. Not the light gold of a common wolf. Something deeper. Something older. A color that had no business being in a student's eyes at a school assembly. Marcus saw it. His smile disappeared for half a second. But he was too proud to let it show. He shoved Ethan again. "Hit me back, blank," he said. "Oh wait, you cannot. You have nothing." The room held its breath. Ethan looked at Marcus for a long, still moment. Then he closed his eyes. He breathed out slowly, and he stepped back. He walked out of the assembly hall alone. Nobody followed him, not even Lena, who stood watching the door long after he had gone through it. Winter recess was 2 days away. The school was half empty, students heading to their packs for the break, the corridors growing quieter, hour by hour. Ethan was at his locker on the last afternoon, packing a few things into his bag, when he heard the footsteps behind him. He did not need to turn around to know who it was. Marcus came with 3 of his closest friends. They chose the east corridor because it was away from classrooms, away from cameras, away from anyone who might say something. It was the kind of choice that people make when they know what they are about to do is wrong. It began the usual way. Words first, then a shove. Then his bag was pulled from his hands and emptied onto the floor. His notebooks spread across the tiles. His pens rolled in every direction. He crouched down to gather them, and Marcus stepped on his hand. Not hard enough to hurt him badly, just hard enough to say he could. Then Marcus reached into the inside pocket of Ethan's blazer, which had fallen open, and pulled out a letter. It was folded and worn at the edges, as if it had been carried for a long time. The envelope was cream-colored and heavy. It was sealed with dark wax, pressed with an insignia that Marcus did not recognize. A crown over a wolf, clean and old and absolute. He opened it before Ethan could move. He read it aloud, slowly, mockingly. The words were formal and short. They spoke of duty and return. They spoke of a throne waiting. They ended with a line that Marcus read in a silly, exaggerated voice, drawing out each word for his friends. "Your father awaits your return." His friends laughed. Marcus held the letter up. "A throne," he laughed. "This is what you carry around? A fake letter about a throne?" Ethan stood up. His voice was very calm. "Give it back." Marcus looked at the letter, then he looked at Ethan. Then, holding eye contact, he tore the letter in half. The sound was small, quiet, a soft tear of thick paper. Lena was passing the corridor. She stopped in the doorway. She saw the torn pieces fall. She saw Ethan's face. Ethan looked down at the two halves of the letter on the floor. He bent slowly and picked them up. He held them in his hands and looked at them for a moment, like a person saying goodbye to something. Then he looked up at Marcus. He did not look angry. He did not look hurt. He looked like a door that has just decided to open. "You should not have done that," he said. His voice was so calm that it was almost frightening. Marcus stepped closer. "What are you going to do about it, blank?" Ethan exhaled, and he stopped holding back. It started with the air. The temperature dropped. Not like a window opening, like something cold and ancient pushing up through the floor. Marcus's friends felt it first. One of them took a step back without meaning to. Another pressed himself against the wall, his eyes wide, not understanding what his body was doing or why. Then came the pressure. It was not a sound exactly. It was more like the moment before a very large sound, held forever. It pressed down on every person in that corridor like a hand on the back of the neck, gentle, but impossible to stand against. Marcus stood his ground. He was an alpha's son. His wolf was strong. He told himself he was not afraid. But his wolf knew better. Because his wolf recognized what was standing in front of them. His wolf recognized it the way all wolves recognize something so far above them in the hierarchy, that the recognition lives in the blood, not the brain. His wolf understood, clearly and completely, that the boy standing in this corridor was not a blank, was not a rogue, was not a nobody. His wolf understood that this was the son of the Alpha King, the highest blood in their world, the top of every chain, every line, every rank that had ever existed among their kind. Marcus's knees hit the floor. He did not decide to kneel. His body did it for him. His three friends were already against the walls, heads down, eyes low, not speaking. The pressure in the corridor was not painful. It did not hurt anyone. It simply made it clear, in a way that could not be argued with, where everyone in that hallway stood, in relation to Ethan Cole. Lena stood in the doorway. Her hand was over her mouth. Her eyes were wide. Footsteps came from the far end of the corridor. Steady, unhurried. Dean Holt appeared. He stopped at the entrance to the corridor. He looked at Marcus on the floor. He looked at the three boys pressed against the wall. He looked at Ethan, standing in the center of it all, still and calm, and fully himself for the first time in 3 years. The dean's face showed no surprise, only something that looked like relief. He lowered his head, not a nod, a proper bow, slow and deliberate. "Prince Ethan," he said quietly, "you're welcome home to yourself." The words moved through the corridor like a current through still water. "Prince." Marcus looked up from the floor. His face was pale. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "That is not possible." Ethan looked down at him. There was no cruelty in his face. No satisfaction. If anything, there was sadness. The kind of sadness that comes from seeing someone clearly and not liking what you see, and knowing it is too late to change it. "I know," Ethan said. "That is exactly what my father wanted me to understand." By nightfall, the school was a different place. Word moved fast, the way it always does in communities built on bloodlines and status. Pack channels lit up. Elder networks buzzed. 3 boys tried to explain what they had felt in that corridor, and found they did not have good enough words for it. The story spread anyway. In their world, this kind of story always spreads. Before morning, a car arrived at the school gates. It was a single car, no guards, no ceremony. The man who stepped out of it was tall and quiet, and moved through the air, like someone who had never once in his life needed to announce himself. King Alden Cole walked to his son's dormitory and stood in the doorway. They looked at each other for a long moment. Ethan was sitting on his bed with the 2 torn pieces of the letter laid flat on the desk beside him, fitted back together like a puzzle. His father sat down in the chair across from him. He looked at the letter. He looked at Ethan. "You held it longer than I expected," the king said. "I almost did not," Ethan said. "But you did." Ethan nodded. His father reached across and placed his hand briefly on Ethan's shoulder. That was all. But it was enough. Marcus Vane was called before the dean and a panel of pack elders 3 days into the new term. The meeting was formal and quiet and resulted in consequences that followed Marcus for a long time. Ethan did not ask for it. He did not push for it. The school had rules, and those rules existed for every student, regardless of whether they knew who they were dealing with. That, Ethan mentioned once to the dean, was the entire point. On a cold evening near the end of term, Lena climbed to the roof of the east wing. She went there to think, the way she always had. She was not expecting company. Ethan was already there. She sat down beside him, and they looked out at the dark tree line together for a while without speaking. The sky was clear. The stars were very bright. "Why did you not say anything?" she finally asked. "For 3 years. Why did you not just tell someone?" He thought about it. "Because my father sent me here to learn something," he said. "He wanted me to know, not just to understand as an idea, but to actually know, in my body, in my days, what it feels like to have no power. To be treated like you do not matter. To wake up every morning and wonder if today will be worse than yesterday." Lena was quiet. "He will be king one day," Ethan continued, speaking about himself in the third person, the way people do when they are trying to see themselves clearly. "And kings make choices about who gets protected and who gets forgotten. He wanted me to never be able to forget what being forgotten feels like." Lena looked at him. Did it work? He kept his eyes on the trees, the stars reflected in them, very faintly. "Ask me, in 20 years, he said, "when I am sitting on that throne. Every decision I make will answer that question." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want a front row seat." Ethan turned to look at her. It was the first real, full smile she had ever seen on his face. It changed him completely. He looked younger. He looked free. "You already have one," he said. Above them, the stars burned cold and steady and indifferent to all of it, to ranks and crests and thrones, and the long, patient work of becoming the kind of person who deserves to lead. But the 2 people sitting on that rooftop were not indifferent. They were very much awake, and very much alive, and the night in front of them felt, for the first time in a long time, like the beginning of something good.